So there's a lot of troubling news coming from Iran, and I want to bring this up because it has a lot to do with freedom of expression and the dangers of living in a theocracy. So, The Independent reports more than 40 people, including at least 8 women, have been rounded up in the southern port city of Bandar Abbas, 630 miles south of Tehran, according to the IRNA news agency. Among the detainees are Instagram models and people who work in photography, beauty salons, and wedding businesses, who used social media to share footage that the state deems, quote, indecent. So, police said those arrested were, quote, damaging public virtue through organized spreading of anti-cultural activities. Huh? It's hard to wrap your mind around how this is even a problem. Like, okay, a wedding business posted a picture of what I'm assuming a bride, maybe a woman in a wedding dress, because in Iran you're supposed to have your head veiled. That's part of their religious code. But like a beauty salon, how are you going to show people how good you can cut their hair? Like, they're trying to advertise for a business here. It's obvious that they're not doing it to spread, like, whatever it is, Western culture throughout the country. No, they're just posting and advertising, catching up with social media. And if you want your business to stay relevant, you go to where people are. If people are on Instagram, that's where you go to advertise. It's that simple. But among the detainees, Instagram models, like, okay, that one, if in a theocracy like Iran where you're not allowed to, show any kind of sexuality, you're not, they repress their women to such a degree that even just taking a picture of yourself and putting it online is considered a problem. But it's really disturbing, the trend that I've seen, like, just this last week coming out, because this is not the only story. There's also the story of Madeh Hojabri. I hope I said that right. Forgive me if I pronounce it wrong. An 18-year-old. She was she was dancing. Like, just dancing on Facebook. And not, like, shaking her ass, not throwing it back. No. She was, like, ballerinas type, like that kind of dancing. Like, who gives a fuck? But apparently the authorities do, because they arrested her and dragged her onto state TV to make an apology, in which she said that basically, I was just doing it to try to gain followers like anybody else would. I mean, I take my hat off to her for, like, admitting it, even though she didn't have a fucking choice. Like admitting the reason why she does it, because that's what everybody shares stuff for. I mean, people crave attention, people crave likes. But she obviously isn't going to be allowed to say, well, I think that's a silly law, and I was just dancing innocently and hoping people liked it and enjoyed it and shared it and followed me, and maybe, just being a normal person. But that was not the most disturbing story, even though it is pretty disturbing, because it's a gross violation of freedom of expression, freedom of speech, basic human rights, and dignity. But this last one's even more nutty. So there was a guy who was at a wedding in Iran. He was 15 years old at the time. And there's not a lot of information behind the story other than what I can tell you, because there's just not a lot that's been released. But he's 15 years old. He's at a wedding, and apparently this wedding was off the chain because people were getting drunk. 15-year-olds at this wedding were getting hammered, apparently, and, like, there was a murder. And this had nothing to do with the murder, by the way. This was a separate murder, completely, mutually exclusive from the fact that this kid was drunk. But he got found out. I don't know. I don't remember how he got like ratted on, but 10 years later, so in 2018, he's now 25 years old, and he received 80 lashes, 80 fucking lashes. It's unbelievable for drinking 10 years ago. They didn't make it clear why they waited 10 years to whoop this dude's back. It's sick. It's gross. They don't have a video. There's just one photo that surfaced, so I'll throw that up. It's terrifying because this would definitely be me if I lived in Iran. My back would be so fucked up because there's no way I would let it. I can't really say that because that's not fair to them. But it would be hard. It's hard for myself to imagine not being able to express my like ideas and values like these people can't. And to be, an atheist is already like probably like to what, 200 lashes. It's more unfortunate if you're considered an apostate because that means you leave your religion, and that's like considered like all Muslims everywhere just about, I think, have a consensus that 70% of them agree with the fact that, yeah, if you leave Islam, that's like the worst sin against God or Allah you could possibly make, other than drawing a fucking cartoon of him, apparently. But I digress. So I just thought I'd bring this to everybody's attention because Iran is currently in the middle of the Middle East conflict, and in Syria they're arming the Bashar al-Assad regime, who I happen to not necessarily support, but it's his country. He has every right as a leader of a sovereign nation, democratically elected leader of a sovereign nation, to accept the help of foreign nations in a war and conflict. We were not invited, by the way. Neither were France and Great Britain, but all of us, including the Saudis, have been bombing the shit out of the country. We've been bombing the shit out of Yemen. I have to bring up Yemen every time I talk about Saudi Arabia because they are still starving out these people. They're the largest outbreak of cholera in the history of humankind has occurred there because their infrastructure's literally shit, meaning shit got in the water, and Vibrio cholerae, the virus, got into their drinking water supply, and now they're all suffering from cholera, which is easily treatable, except they're blocking the ports, and we're assisting them to help these people get food and resources. So it's absolutely insane to me how we can support and back these people, and we need to stop. But you'll hear the U.S., especially people on the right or neoliberals, neocons, all of them will say without a hesitation that Iran is the biggest state sponsor of terrorism, which isn't true, and also the biggest threat to global security, peace. That's nonsense. That is absolute nonsense because they are, like I said, Shia Muslims. They don't believe in martyrdom. They don't believe you get 72 virgins when you blow yourself up in a suicide attack. That's all Sunni Islam. That's what ISIS believes. That's what Saudi Arabia believes. That's what all of these extremist groups that want to create a caliphate or a Islamic state, that's what all of them practice. Now, there are some, like you'll have Hamas and Hezbollah. Those are some Shia terrorist groups. But you have to keep in mind that they're reactionary in the sense that they're not going out trying to establish a caliphate. They're under attack and under siege. And one, they just get labeled immediately as a terrorist by the Western media because they're fighting against our interests, even though they're just usually defending their own land. So in Israel, you have Palestine and the conflict between them. So Hamas is going to naturally come out of there's going to be an uprising against Israel of some degree when you bomb them constantly and you repress them constantly. So you're going to have Hezbollah come out of the woodwork, and that's exactly what happened. You have a terrorist group or a resistance group come out, like a militant group, I should say, rise up out of the repression. And that's exactly how the U.S. has been able to take over countries in the Middle East, like Iraq, Afghanistan, but not control them. Because we can say, oh, yeah, well, they're the Mujahideen, even though, each militant group, by division could be different, or platoon, or whatever the fuck you call it. Their beliefs change differently. But you usually won't have a lot of support behind the less radical groups that are just fighting for their freedom or fighting to protect their land, with the exception of the Kurds, who we recently stopped supporting anyways, because, Turkey and Russia have other plans, and they don't particularly care for the Kurds because they think the Kurds are encroaching on their land, and that's a whole nother shit show to get into. So this started with Iran and how fucked up and backwards it is. If you stuck through the whole thing, God bless you, even though he's not real. He would bless you if he was, I promise. Thank you for sticking around, like I said, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's at BMS Skater 93, but the S and Skater are the same, so it's BM Skater 93. And Facebook.com at The Primo Show. And I will see you fuckers later. Peace out.